Ah yes, South Asia, nestled away between the Himalayas in the north and the Indian Ocean in the south. This highly populated region of the world, 1/4 of the entire world at close to 2 billion people, is home to 7 different notable countries: Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Not only that, it is a historical hub for cultures and religion past and present, being home today to more Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Zoroastrians, and Muslims than any other region in the entire world. Human remains of our ancestors as old as 75,000 years have been found in the region, as well as evidence of one of the oldest civilizations known as the Indus Valley Civilization, which rose to prominence during 3300 to 1300 BCE in the northwestern region of South Asia. But for today audiences, our video focuses in on much more of a current issue, the economic collapse or the impending economic collapse of the South Asian regions, and some of the struggles facing the region's economies amidst the fall of Pakistan and Sri Lanka in recent years. We look at some of these struggles today to try to better understand if some of the bigger economies, namely Bangladesh and India, are also at risk. When someone says South Asia, most people probably think of India. And admittedly, India is by a mile still the largest economy in the region and one of the largest economies in the entire world. Reserving itself a place on the G20 panel, it has a nominal GDP of around 3 trillion with a T dollars, and is responsible for about 80% of all economic output in South Asia. At a distant second is Bangladesh, with a nominal GDP of around $300 billion, a 9% share of the South Asian economic output. Until recently, Bangladesh was actually the fastest growing economy in Asia and one of the fastest in the world. Pakistan is a close third when it comes to nominal GDP and economic output in the region. However, as you know in economics, the data shows what you want it to show. So if we look at GDP per capita, it is generally the islands with smaller populations that are wealthy per se on a net basis, with Maldives way ahead of the pack at a GDP per capita of around $7,500. Sri Lanka and Bhutan are at a distant second and third with a GDP per capita of around in the mid 3,000 range. These two are also the only South Asian nations to receive a high rating on the HDI Human Development Index. The larger and more populous nations in South Asian region generally have GDP per capita in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, with Bangladesh and India leading that group. In the last decade or two, Bangladesh's GDP has been on a rocket ride up. While Pakistan had many good years until the onset of the pandemic, India is a similar case to Bangladesh and has enjoyed a stellar couple decades of growth before the pandemic spiked down. India has a larger GDP than many wealthier global north nations such as Canada. Meanwhile, in another large South Asian economy, Sri Lanka, the last decade has proven a choppy ride up for GDP, with relative stagnation in recent years and an inevitable downturn in the present situation. But what is exactly the issue? Especially when the numbers for the biggest player, India, and the second biggest player in the region, Bangladesh, still look decent? Well, for one, the region is susceptible to a lot of the foreign currency and debt risks similar to other booming emerging market economies around the world. And in an inflationary high, rising interest rate environment, these are not necessarily helpful qualities for economic growth. Before we can better understand why Sri Lanka's foreign reserve exchanges are going to near zero and how this is a massive red flag, we need to understand what foreign reserves are and what they do. You see, the central banks of countries usually hold on to some US dollars, and in other cases safe havens like yens, francs, and euros. And in other cases also gold is still used today. Basically, the most stable currencies in order to pay off foreign denominated debt, as well as yield influence over monetary policy overseas. Doing so provides buffers to market shocks and catastrophic events leading to the devaluation of the local currency. So how close to zero foreign reserves is Sri Lanka? A recent read put their balance at below $2 billion, while the government estimates it will require at least $6 billion more in the next 6 months to meet its basic obligations. Effectively, the government is already in default when it comes to debt obligations, and the masses are suffering due to shortages of essentials such as medicine, fuel, and food. Now couple low foreign reserves with mounting debt in a high interest rate world, and you have a recipe for disaster, as this article from Nikkei states, quote, "Over the years, Beijing pumped in cheap loans in exchange for strategic assets through long-term leasing programs, giving itself a strategic hedge against India. Sri Lanka owes an estimated 10% of its debt to China, while Pakistan's figure has been reported at 27.4%, end quote. While none, except Bhutan, of the countries in South Asia ranks among the highest in the world when it comes to national debt compared to GDP, the numbers for Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, and the Maldives all are in the 75 to 85% range, and not low debt burdens by any measure. Whereas Bangladesh, Nepal, and Myanmar are in a relatively stronger position with debts in the 30% range. In a rising interest rate environment, coupled with possible growth shocks, creates much more economic volatility, especially if government tax revenues shrink and the rate of borrowing continues to climb along with interest rates. At some point, some lenders have to take what economists call a haircut. Now, this is not like going to your local barber and getting a cut. This means to forgive or accept that some of the debts of the nation will not be paid off, as the case with Sri Lanka in recent months. And as a consequence, these countries have to scramble to find external funding sources who may impose austerity and other harsh measures, which would lead to economic growth further shrinking in the short to medium term, as we already see happening in the case of Sri Lanka. In sum, to take another quote from the recent Nikkei article, start quote, "Most analysts do not participate a repeat of the 1997-98 Forex crisis that swept Southeast Asia. But to avoid becoming the next domino to fall, Continuum's Gallagher prescribed for frontier economies a carefully handled combination of interest rate increases, some currency depreciation to help experts, prudent use of remaining forex reserves, and IMF support. Sri Lanka is seeking a multi-billion-dollar bailout from the IMF." End quotation. It is in no one's interest for the economy of an entire region to falter, especially one that has as many people as South Asia. There will be mass suffering, but given changing tides and monetary conditions worldwide, coupled with poor fiscal decisions and management on part of some actors in the region, there could be more pain to come for everybody. This is Tahmid of Tahmid Talks. If you want to support more content like this or see other videos that are similar, make sure to support the channel by subscribing, hitting the thumbs up, leaving a comment. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.